Hi, so now we'll go chapter by chapter, and so this is chapter one. I'll make most recordings for most chapters. There's a couple that really doesn't help do recordings, so I'll skip those. But yeah, if you have any questions about the recording and stuff, let me know, okay, by email, and we'll go from there. Okay. Okay, so okay. The chapter one outline, so brief history of human anatomy, definition, etc., etc. Okay. Anatomy is the study of structure, okay, of the human body. So human anatomy is the structure of the human body, where things are. Physiology, which you guys will take next quarter, is the function, what they do, okay? So these things always go together, right? So in fact, there are some classes that teach anatomy and physiology together, okay? But I actually think it's slightly better this way to for you guys to get an understanding of anatomy then physiology instead of trying to put both of them together, which is a little bit more difficult, okay? Okay, so the two categories of anatomy, microscopic anatomy, which is using a microscope, obviously, includes two things: cytology, which is study of cells, okay, and histology, which is a study of tissues. So cells, we learn about the parts and components of a cell, and that's chapter 4 in this book, okay. Histology is chapter 5 in this book, the study of tissues, okay. And then gross anatomy is what you guys are probably more familiar with, looking at a structure and seeing the muscles and seeing the bones, etc., etc. Okay. Okay. Comparative anatomy, you guys won't need to worry about. Developmental anatomy and embryology will barely cover in chapter 3. Okay. Okay. So regional anatomy and systemic anatomy are two different ways of understanding anatomy. Okay, what you guys will be doing mostly is systemic anatomy, and if you get further along in nursing, it'll be more regional. The reason is systematic anatomy is easier to teach, and it's easier for people who have no background in anatomy to start with systemic anatomy, to go through each system and understand what happens in each system. The regional anatomy is like, okay, I'm gonna hack someone's arm off and look at all the muscles, nerves, and bones that are in that arm and how they fit together and work together. But that requires you knowing what a bone is, knowing what muscles do, knowing what nerves do, knowing what blood vessels do, etc., etc., etc. Okay? So this class is built on systemic anatomy. Okay? All right, so one of the things about the human body is that it's very structural and very organized. Okay, so we are made out of the human. I'm gonna go backwards from this. So we are made out of a human organism. That's what we are. As a human organism, we have different systems, like a cardiovascular system, or digestive system, etc. Those systems are made out of organs. Okay, like brains, hearts. Okay, individual muscles. Individual bones, etc., etc., etc. Those are organs. Okay, organs are made from tissues. Okay, and then tissues are made from individual cells, and cells are made out of molecules, and then molecules are made out of atoms, and then atoms are made out of other stuff, which none of which is actually even biology anymore. Okay. Okay. These are the living things that require you to live. So for you to be considered alive, right, living organism, you have to have all these, okay, except reproduction, really. Reproduction, not everyone has to reproduce, but if your species fails to reproduce, then it goes extinct. Okay, so intro to organ systems. Okay. And this is how your chapters will work. Okay. So chapter 5 will deal with the integuments. Okay. Chapter 6 through 9 will deal with the skeleton system. So the integument, okay, is the system that protects you, interacts with the outside world. Okay. There's the skin and associated legs. Okay. The skeletal system is your support structure. Along with your support structure is your protective structure. So your ribs right here protect your heart, your cranium right here protect your brain, etc., etc., etc. Okay, and the system that works along with the skeletal system is the muscle system. Usually they're called the muscle-skeletal system, and I'm sure you guys heard that term before. The muscles, okay, attach to primarily the bones, and that's how you actually move. Okay, so skeletal system is the bones, the muscular system is the muscles. The muscles help you move. Okay. All right. The nervous system. Okay. If we were in class, I would throw something at one of you guys, and you guys would either get out of the way of that thing or catch it. To do all that, you have to process a whole crap load of information. Oh crap, something's coming at me. Oh crap, I have to move my head to get out of the way. Oh crap, I have to use my head to catch a piece of flying chalk. All of that requires mental processing, and that occurs in less than a second, and that is your central nervous system. Okay, your fast-moving control system. Combine that with your endocrine system. Your endocrine system is your slow-moving control system that controls more regulated global effects. Okay, I haven't met you guys yet, but I presume more than half of you guys are female. And if I took one of the females and inject them with huge bolus of testosterone, there will be effects down the line. But those effects will occur today, right? It's not like she'll change all of a sudden to Arnold Schwarzenegger looking person today, but over time, she'll get more and more masculine, especially if I continue those injections, okay? But that takes time. So slow moving control system, okay? That has more global functions. Okay, the cardiovascular system, okay, allows for blood to move through the body. If I ask you guys what blood does, most of you guys will be like, oh, it transports oxygen. That's right, but that's only one of the many, many things it does. It not only transports oxygen, but more importantly, it gets rid of carbon dioxide. Because without getting rid of carbon dioxide, you die very, very more quickly than not getting enough oxygen. You go through acidosis and die. Okay. Other things that happen, it transports nutrients from your intestines to your cells. Okay. It transports wastes away from your cells into either the kidney, so you can pee out, or carbon dioxide into your lungs so you can breathe it out. Okay. Okay, your lymphatic system. Your lymphatic system helps control infections and fights off bacteria and other stuff that are killing you. The lymphatic system is a physical structure. The immune system is the cells that do the work, and they work together. And we'll talk much more about that when we talk about this chapter, which is 24. Okay, the respiratory system helps you breathe, right? You breathe in air, you breathe out carbon dioxide. The digestive system, you eat food and you have to absorb food. Okay, so the digestive system, not just for digestion, the more importantly, also for absorption. Okay. All right, the urinary system. Okay, the urinary system, when we eat, have metabolism, our metabolism generates a whole bunch of byproducts. Some of the byproducts we have to get rid of. And the only way we can get rid of them is to filter them out, okay? And then in the kidneys, and then we pee it out. But in addition to that, okay, it does more than that, okay? Because there's so much blood going to making your urine, you can also control blood volume. You can control fluid volume. You can control the amount of salt, okay, and other stuff, okay? Like if I prevented a couple of you guys from drinking at all, like water, not alcohol, but drinking water for a whole day, I guarantee you your urine will be really dark. And that's because your body is trying to conserve water and concentrate the water that it, or conserve the water that it has, so it makes the urine very concentrated. Conversely, if I made one of you guys drink 2 gallons of water, your urine will be very light because you'll be purposely trying to use your urinary system to get rid of the excess water, so you don't carry it around, okay? And last but not least, the reproductive systems for reproduction, and we'll talk more about that in the last chapter. Okay. The first rule of the anatomy is that when you talk about the anatomy, the person is standing in the anatomical position, and this is the anatomical position. The other thing is you're always talking about the body, not your body. So their right, not your right. Okay? So put that another way. That's the right arm. Okay? That's the left arm. Okay? All right. The other thing I want to bring up right now is that there are some terms that have different meanings outside of anatomy than inside anatomy. Okay? For example, that thing right here, this is your arm in anatomy. This is, whoops, this is your forearm. This whole thing is not your arm, okay? Arm, forearm. This is not your leg, okay? This is your leg. This is your thigh, and this is the knee, okay? So some things outside the world, outside of, you know, anatomy lab and anatomy lecture, there are words and phrases that we can't use the same way, okay? Okay. One of the ways that we used to study anatomy, and this was one of the more disturbing things I ever had to see, was how we used to study anatomy. And that was to take a human body and literally cut it into slices and look at each individual slice. Okay? So they did that, and they still have some of the old models left over in the 90s when I was in Berkeley. And I saw that, and still grosses me out to this day. But we still use them, and we just like do it in terms of MRIs and CT scans and stuff like that. Okay, but then we can cut 3D objects, and there's 3 ways to cut it. Okay, so there's 3 different planes: the coronal plane, okay, the transverse plane, and the sagittal plane. Okay, so coronal, you're separating the human body into front and back, okay, or anterior and posterior sections. The transverse, you're separating the human body into a top and a bottom, okay? A sagittal section, you're separating into left and right, A mid-sagittal is where you perfectly split down the exact middle. So you separate the left part of the nose from the right part of the nose, okay, all the way down, literally down the midline. Any other cut that separates left from right is called a sagittal section. Okay, the only other thing, oblique means any other angle that is not a right angle. Okay, so like if I randomly use a machete to hack you guys into pieces, most of the cuts will be oblique cuts. Okay, if you think obliques, these are your obliques here. Your abdominal obliques, they run at angles that are not perpendicular to anything in the body. That's why they're obliques. Okay. Okay. So you can use 3D objects, 2D pictures to actually render into a 3D image. That's literally what my wife does for her job. Okay. Okay. One of the things you have to get really familiar with is anatomical directions, okay, and the anatomical body regions and stuff. Okay, that is the big takeaway home lesson from this chapter. Okay, and the different systems. Okay, but okay, so anatomical directions are, there's always two directions that are opposites. Okay, so anterior means front. Okay, ventral also means front. Okay, so posterior means back, and dorsal means back. So they have slightly different meanings in other animals. Okay, dorsal literally means back. Posterior means butt. But for us, our posterior and our dorsal are the same surface. For other animals, it's not. Okay, but again, just be more, focused on human anatomical directions. Okay, superior means toward the head. Okay, inferior means toward the feet. Okay, rostral and caudal. Caudal means toward the tail. Rostral means toward the nose. If you look at a dog, rostral caudal is a straight line. Okay, in humans it's not. Okay, cranial also means toward the head. Okay. Okay. You have this magical line down the middle of your body. It splits your nose in half, etc., etc. That line is called the midline. Okay, that cut down the middle is called mid-sagittal plane. So that line is called the midline. Medial means toward the midline. Okay, lateral means away from the midline. Okay, for example, okay, my heart is medial to my lungs. My lungs is lateral to my heart. Okay. Let's see what else. Okay. My arm is lateral to my lungs. Okay. My lungs is medial to my arm. Okay. Okay. Ipsilateral means same side. Contra means against. Contralateral, opposite side. Okay. Deep and superficial. I'm sure you guys know those terms. Okay. Proximal and distal. This is kind of the hard one. Okay. So here, let me better view. Okay. So this is my shoulder. This is my arm, forearm. My arm and forearm plug into my body at the shoulder. Okay. So the shoulder is the point where it enters the trunk. So proximal means close to the trunk. Okay, that's the same word from which we get proximity. okay, or approximate, close to. Distal is the same root from which we get distance, okay? So proximal is closer to the trunk, distal is further away from the trunk. So my elbow is proximal to my wrist. My wrist is distal to my elbow, okay? My fingers are distal to my wrist. My wrist is proximal to my fingers, okay? Does that make sense? Usually the words proximal and distal only really refer to arms and legs, okay? Okay, so two major regions, the major axis of the body, so head, neck, trunk is the axial region, and then we have the appendages, your arms and legs, and the things that screw the arms and legs into the body are the appendages, okay? And then here are all the body regions, okay? So make sure you guys are familiar with this, okay? Because again, the terminology, okay? Remember arm and forearm, brachial region, anti-brachial, okay? Carpal, okay? Palmar, and then phalanges, okay? Okay, so make sure you learn these. These are perfect for flashcards, okay? All right. Okay, now there are two cavities in the body, two big holes in the body. So ventral cavity, okay, and the posterior cavity or the posterior aspect, or also known as the dorsal body cavity. Okay, usually I like dorsal and ventral body cavities. It's just more common parlance. Okay, the posterior aspect is split into the cranial cavity and the vertebral canal. Okay, so these two are the posterior aspect, the cranial cavity and the vertebral canal. Okay, the ventral body cavity is in front. The ventral body cavity is split, okay, into two cavities. The thoracic, which is above the diaphragm, and the abdominal, which is below the diaphragm. The abdominal body cavity is split in, or the abdominal pelvic cavity is split into the abdominal up front, okay, right here, and then the pelvic cavity. The difference between abdominal and pelvic cavity is the imaginary line across the top of your hips, okay? So if you put your hands on your hips, okay, you'll come across the top of the hips. Anything below that line is going to be pelvic cavity. Anything above that line is going to be abdominal cavity. But that's an imaginary line. It's not a real thing. It's not like a diaphragm where it's physical. Okay. Okay. The thoracic cavity is subdivided into three chambers. Okay. On the left and right, you have two pleural cavities. Pleural refers to lungs. So you have a lung in each cavity. In the middle, you have something called a mediastinum. Media, middle, sternum, sternum. Okay. In the mediastinum is subdivided into two cavities. Okay. The pericardial cavity, cavity around the heart. Okay. Peri, around, cardial, heart. And this little yellow thing, which is actually called the superior mediastinum. Okay. All right. So the best way to explain it, the membranes, okay, is there are two membranes that separate these cavities from everything else. And these membranes are kind of slippery. And what they do is when you move, instead of sticking together and rubbing, okay, rubbing in the body, very bad thing. Rubbing causes friction, causes heat, causes tearing, very bad thing. So what you want is two layers that are close to each other, but in between the layers is going to be fluid. When you rub against fluid, you have very little friction. Okay, which is good. All right, so the way to explain the membranes really is this picture right here with the balloons. It's the best explanation. You put your hand in the balloon, okay, your hand is the organ, okay, the part of the balloon your hand is touching, okay, is the visceral layer, okay, like for example, this heart will be called visceral pericardium. The outer layer around it is going to be the pericardial layer. So pericardial, or sorry, not parietal, sorry, parietal pericardium. Okay, so visceral pleura is going to be a layer right around the lungs. Parietal pleura is going to be the outside layer, and in between that is going to be the pleural cavity. Okay. 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 That layer, the layer between the two is a serous cavity with serous fluid. Okay. That fluid allows that organ to move a little bit and slip a little bit without damaging the outside. Okay. Perineum, same thing. Okay. Okay, your abdominal regions, okay, abdominal pelvic regions is such a large hole. It really doesn't make any sense to talk about it as one. And so the abdominal pelvic is either subdivided into 9 abdominal pelvic regions or four abdominal quadrants. Okay, this is used more scientifically. This is used more for you guys. Okay, for medical purposes. Okay, if you look at someone's abdomen, what's the first thing that you can recognize, that everyone can recognize? Okay, hopefully your answer is the belly button, because everybody has a belly button. Okay, so you have a belly button, you have things above the belly button, and you have things below the belly button. Everything above is upper, everything below is lower. Everything to the right is right, and everything to the left is left. Okay, so the way you kind of use this is, look, you have pain in your abdominal region. Where is it? Which quadrant is it in? Okay, if it's right lower quadrant, 100% sure. Okay, almost certainly appendicitis. Okay, your appendix is right there. Pain in the right upper quadrant, most likely liver or gallbladder problem. Left upper quadrant, stomach problem or spleen problem. Left lower quadrant, it'll be actually intestinal problem, most likely something called diverticulitis. Okay, right here. Okay, so by understanding what quadrant the pain is in, it eliminates a lot of different things and points you toward possible causes. Does it have to be appendicitis in the right lower quadrant? No. Is it most likely that? Yes. Okay. All right. So that ends chapter 1. Okay. And we'll move on to chapter 2 in the next chapter.